Tortured, tested and sweated to produce the world's fastest and most reliable Super Tourers. Now at Amaroo in Sydney's West, Australia, May 96. The waiting's over. 3 years of this newest of motor racing generations. And BMW's German task force has been crowned champion of champions. But come race time, 96 is a whole new story. Peter Brock, the man who tamed the Mountain Monster 9 times, has rocketed into the Super Tourers grid, aided by the power of the mighty Volvo. He wants to scar Paul Morris, BMW's young gun, last year's idol and spirit of Super Tourers. Geoff Brabham, Mr. Cool, dedicated to wrest the trophy back. And Murphy and Jones. Audi's challenge is bigger and brasher than ever. Supported by the flashy, charismatic GT production, the Showroom Showdown, the F1 sex machine Ferrari, the luxury Porsche, the Pedigree Lotus. For the next hour, buckle up, slide in comfortably, and hang on tight for the fastest and most exhilarating sporting journey of the year. Super Tourer Sunday, Edition 1. The preview, here on 10 Sunday of Sport. (1995), Morris's title, BMW's triumph. The talented Queenslanders' immaculate team reeled off victories, keeping teammate Brabham and challenges from Audi at bay. For the second year running, the red and white machines put the 95 championship out of reach. With closer racing, more manufacturers and new venues, 1996 is bigger, better, and potentially the most exciting yet. 8 manufacturers will contest no fewer than 16 championship races. And the question of aerodynamic aids means every manufacturer is allowed to carry a front splitter and a rear wing. An area of advantage is now equalised, and the prospect everybody can look forward to is for the spectacle to increase. In the off-season, the introduction of 19-inch wheels and tyres, the extraction of precious extra horsepower, a driver acclimatising to his new machine, or one pushing the envelope of adhesion. So who would use the closed season to best effect? And who would grab the early season advantage? Both the Australian Grand Prix and IndyCar brought the teams together for the first time to launch the 1996 championship.
Get set for a start, 8,500 revs, these little things rev to, watch for the green, and they're underway in the Pitney Bowes 2-litre touring car race here at Surfers Paradise.
BMW won the first Super Tourers event at the Australian Grand Prix, and they scorched again at Indy.
Coming under a challenge there.
There's Charlie O'Brien poking down the inside. He could, they've got the squeeze from Jeffrey Brabham, but Charlie's obviously got the eyes on today.
So we'll watch him as he ranges up on the outside.
The BMW-Audi rivalry continued, but would they overcook the intensity?
Side by side, and down the inside. He's overdone it.
And
that takes the two of them out. He overdid it down the inside, locked everything up, a desperate manoeuvre. Now he's gone for the windscreen wipers. Morris has backed off, back in the fray, probably about 8th, I would think. This is going to make the race great.
Well, this puts Jeffrey Brabham back in the lead in the Diet Coke BMW.
And Jimmy Rich.
The crash and bash left Geoff Brabham in front. Brad Jones, Charlie O'Brien and Jim Richards are tentative.
GT production record here. Also been a runner-up in Group A touring cars. And never gives up. And is probably one of the most tidy, neat, yet deceptively fast drivers in the field.
He's been known to have a very wide car from time to time also.
Been hard to get around, Alan.
Just a tad. Well, there, oh no, with Jones at the wall, there's a little bit of a fire there as well. He's clouded that pretty hard.
He's coming, and a big hit.
Very hard.
Brad Jones in the Audi has hit the wall, top end of the circuit with a big hit. Car is on fire.
Brad Jones's untimely smash put him out of the race. It sent emergency crews scurrying, concerned for the star's safety.
Certainly a place you have to brake hard there. Well, here's the two. He's out of the car. He's quite okay. These cars are very, very strong. Don't like to see fire, though. But the crew are very, very quick. He's hurt arthritic leg or something there. I think it's gone in very hard. I can't imagine how it's gone in that hard of that part of the track.
Jones escaped shaken up, admitting driver error, but escaped serious injury.
So let's look at on the replay, and straight ahead. Yes, no attempt to turn into that corner. Coming onto the main straight again now with only 2 laps to go.
Charlie O'Brien
So
led,
it's Charlie O'Brien
but the
with about a 2 or
privateer
3
was being
car length lead
pursued
now
by
from Jeffrey
Brabham.
There's that extra bit of power. Look at Brabham, Jeff Brabham. He didn't get out of the corner as well as Charlie. But you can see him
Whose
just
powerful factory back
down the
car
straight.
was
It's
gaining
a
on
little bit
straight
more
line
power.
speed.
But Charlie's going to get in as late as he can. Brabham also late. Jim Richards closes up. I think Charlie could just hang on to this.
Back to second, just touched third here, then back to second gear for the chicane. In these beautiful sequential gearboxes, Alan, where they don't actually even have to go into neutral. It's kind of like a motorcycle gear change.
But Jones wasn't the only wall banger. Jeff Brabham was staring ahead at a nightmare.
Now look, Charlie's going to go down the outside and Brabham will move over. Charlie's going to get in a block and he's gone round.
Yes.
Brabham's gone round. He's locked the rears up. I think he's done it all himself, and there's Jim's got involved.
Yes, he's taken
That
out
puts
Richards.
Rocks through into second position, and it looks like Murphy almost right behind him.
Watch it on the replay, and you can see there that the Diet Coke BMW of Brabham has just looped it around almost under 360 and just being clouted. He had to defend
In the
himself
end,
from
without a
Richards.
competitive
And
Brabham and
therefore,
Jones,
Charlie really controlled the
veteran
race.
Charlie
Well,
O'Brien
there you go.
won a
See the
cool,
Gold Coasters,
confident
they've looked
race.
through again.
So, Charlie O'Brien takes the checkered flag here at Surfers Paradise.
Still ahead on Sunday Super Tourers, the fabulous Jones boys.
The funniest,
Murphy says, I want a part of this too. Oh, no, 1, 2, 3 abreast as they go down the kick and can't do this, but they've done it. What about Jones in the centre? What can he do? Murphy's going to win the corner.
But look at Cleland. He's going past both of them on the inside. Incredible. Down to the chicane. Cleland goes up to 7th position. That is fantastic.
Well, I think if there's good racing, people like to see good racing. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 litres or 2 litres. As long as it's good, close racing and lots of action, they'll be there.
It's close racing. It makes a big difference. When it's close, it's exciting.
It's more cars that you see on the road. There's different brands, different makes, so I think it'll be a lot better.
I like the German engineering and all that. I like the BMWs.
Do you think you, as a spectator, would you go and give the 2 litres a chance this season?
Only if I saw them on Channel 10 regularly, in a good time slot, so that I knew what they were all about.
I love 2 litre racing.
I think that 2 litre perhaps puts on better racing than the 5 litres. They're definitely incredibly fast when you consider the difference in lap times between a 5 litre and a 2 litre.
Following their superb debut season in 1995, Brad Jones will once again be partnered by Greg Murphy in the Audi Sport Team. 1996 will see them in the hot new Audi A4 Quattro, the machine that dominated the 1995 World Cup.
The answer to any question is, can you win the race? And to be able to do that, you need to be able to distance yourself from whoever you're competing with and be willing to cut their throat if necessary. I mean, and the rivalry is very intense. Diet Coke BMW have been dominant for the last year or two, and hopefully this year the Oryx Audi Sport cars will be, and you know, the rivalry is very intense. Ego is one of those things, you know, any sports person's got quite a large ego. They need to have one to do what they do, and some people are a bit quiet about it and some are quite noisy, but when it's all said and done, the rivalry is very intense. This type of racing tends to lend itself to having to be very, very close and having to rub a bit of paint off each other as you're going by, and therefore it creates a little bit of aggro.
The Albury-based team chose Murphy to provide an excellent youthful balance to the skills of Jones. The difference in skills and styles of both drivers allows a free flow of information, both technical and driving.
Well, I think we got a chance of winning a lot of them. You know, we've got a couple of rounds at Amaroo, which is going to be suited to our car. Oran Park, Mallala, Winton. I mean, any of those, I'm sure we can win. We can win most of those rounds. It comes down a lot. Obviously, it's very competitive. 2-litre racing is very competitive. It's just, you know, it's in some ways it's similar to last year. It's very nice to drive. It's relatively easy to drive in comparison to some other cars, I think. And it's just because of the Quattro, it's just a fantastic package. And as I said before, it does feel different to last year's car. It feels like a smaller, more nimble car than last year, and I think it's definitely a contender.
The biggest difference for us is it's more aerodynamic. It's got a sequential gearbox, and the engine has a little bit more horsepower, and with the mix of all that, we can tend to hang on to the BMWs and the Mondeo a little bit more. They've got different brakes, different horsepower, just completely different types of cars. So you get a lot more passing and a lot more action than you tend to in a V8 race. It's just like the British Championship, very close, very exciting, and very intense.
The four-wheel grunt of the Audi out of the corner is terrific, and we're with Frank Wheeler now. The blue flag waves, but Wheeler doesn't need to worry. He crosses the line to win the third race in succession in the Audi A4 Quattro.
Under the management of Brad's brother Kim Jones, the company has regularly supplied information and technology to other Audi sports teams, including the German parent company, to aid their championship title bids.
It's like any new business venture, and that's basically what we have as a business venture. We have to work hard to get the respect of the Germans. They're the leaders, they're the ones that build the cars, but our rapport with the Germans and the things that we have done and achieved, they're very pleased with. So much so that there's a little bit of technology flow backwards and forwards between us and them.
But the race is in my head. I'm attacking the illusion, but the stopping drives me mad.
On the way next, Volvo, like you've never seen it or seen him before.
The Adelaide Homes on...
Jones out in front, he made a blinder of a start.
We're going to watch it all on Cold
back from Richards, Stephen Richards. That's the Volvo. There's Elroy. Oh, the Volvo! Oh, what about the save? Oh, what about the save? He got it sideways and got it back. Well done, Tony Scott.
Super Tourers, motor racing's new world order. The fastest international motor racing revolution of its kind. And from the brazen Scandinavian sunlight, the wild new Swedish Volvo.
Bring it on!
1994, and on the track where he had won 9 Bathurst 1000s, Peter Brock was coming out of a maze of Holden victories, headlong into Volvo. 2 years later, Peter Brock is back with Volvo, and the tempo is even more electrifying.
Well, it's an interesting situation, I guess, that the 2-litre boys have got themselves into, because they've actually embraced innovation. I think to a large degree they've said, okay, there's the rules, they're reasonably restrictive, but if it doesn't say you can't do it, assume you can. And that's quite different than a lot of other classes. So it's quite an eye-opener to hop into the Volvo, for instance. A lot of carbon fibre work is the first thing that strikes you. They've done a lot of work in terms of engine repositioning, getting the driver sitting back down low, and making all of the controls. They're really like a Formula One car in many respects in terms of the ergonomics. I mean, you've got that steering wheel sitting there, and you've got that gear shift, which is bang those gears through. And the workmanship is quite superb. And I suppose that anyone there who is anticipating having a look at Super Tourers, come along and have a look in the pits there at the equipment, at the machinery, and I think it's really quite remarkable.
There's questions about Volvo. Questions about Volvo's ability to break BMW's domination. But ace British touring car and Formula One Supremo Tom Walkinshaw is holding all the keys. A new aerodynamic and suspension package is on the way. A minimal loss in straight-line speed has haunted preparations, but Brock's confident that's a thing of the past.
Well, we'd like to be going a little faster than we are at the moment, but we do have to accept the fact that Volvo is going very fast in Europe at the moment, in the British Championship. There are a number of developments that have taken place, and we're quite busy actually just upgrading our car and carrying out some further development to bring it up to the 96 specs. The car is still pretty quick, let's face it. I mean, straight off the shelf, the thing's a very fast car, but we're in there to be super competitive. It's interesting you mention about the power down, because that's something which we have been chasing, and I suspect that the car's faster on a flowing circuit such as Amaroo than it is on a stop-start circuit such as the Indy circuit. I believe that we're probably chasing a little bit of straight-line speed at the moment, so, you know, when you're on a stop-start circuit, that becomes very power-sensitive, you know, and power down becomes a real issue. You're trying to get that mid-range speed up through a corner, and you just sort of, you're really trying to trade off. You're trying to get too fast into the corner, for your own liking, try not to hit all those curbs, and getting on the power early as possible, hoping to make up for perhaps being 5k slower down the straight. Now, we know that we've identified the fact that in 1996 that Volvo's got a more potent engine package than what we're currently using, so that'll come on stream, and I think that all in all, when you add up the power down, a little bit extra power, a little bit of aerodynamic downforce, and a little bit of extra stability from later suspension mods, the car will be pretty good.
In its third year, Super Touring are becoming one of Australia's premier motorsports. But it's evolved from the massive offshore base in England. Volvo spends the dollar in Australia as well and backs it up with the face of motor racing's #1 identity.
A lot of people have asked the question, why Volvo? And to be fair to expect, it's going to surprise a lot of people.
No, there's no doubt that super touring is the best way for a manufacturer to give his products a new image and to, I guess, look at the demographics and say, right, we want to position our car in the marketplace in a certain position. There's a lot of cars around in the in that model size which are very, very similar to each other. But by motor racing, you can give that car a bit of an image, you can give that car a bit of a lift, and all of a sudden it becomes something special, it becomes something different.
It's small by factory, but not on heart. Volvo's 4 mechanics and manager George Shepherd are harnessing their team's skills to produce a competitive product. Volvo guarantee it.
When a team has to get out there and tow the thing around themselves and they really put in those hard yards, there's no doubt about it, you do get your just reward. So, you know, it's a very small, tight ship. I mean, you've got George and 3 young guys there that, I suppose, transport the car around. There's an electronics guy that is busy unravelling the mysteries of onboard computers, etc. But, you know, compared to a lot of other teams where you might have a dozen people, they're very willing workers.
The king of the mountain is on the road, a different type of one in a different world. But his glittering career is proof Volvo will be on their mettle once the green light flashes. On the road next, Task Force Germany, the new BMW, the Independent Army, the Super Privateers. Out on their own. On their own in the hotbed of one of the world's most powerful and highly technological sports. Unlike the big sponsor-backed teams, and without the street cred, there's little money for technology and engine development. For these guys, much of their development is luck and sound management.
Probably the hardest part about this level of racing is that as a privateer, we don't have any credibility. I'm not a Peter Brock or Jim Richards. Until such time as I become that calibre of personality, really corporate Australia don't want to deal with you.
There's a lot of work goes into good luck, and 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, and vice versa. But no, we just get out there and do our best with what we've got.
In the cloak and dagger of super tourers, the privateers could be left out in the cold. But there's a cooperation here. The bigger teams work to assist the small, using their power to foster those worse off.
Oh yeah, we can't afford to go testing, so they virtually do their testing for us and are able to steer us in the right direction as far as setup of the car and things like that, and without that we'd be lost.
Against a backdrop of big budgets, high-tech tourers, the privateers can get caught in a minefield of trouble. Justin Matthews' spin out at the Gold Coast Indy, proof where there's smoke, there's fire.
It's cost us money, which we didn't have. It's cost us time, which we had even less of, so but that's racing.
1996 is going to be a huge test for one privateer. Pickett wants to seduce Hyundai back in '97.
Sure, they're not going to come to us with any support in 1996, but there's every possibility if we do the right job for them this year that they'll come aboard in 1997.
But Pickett and Matthews are aware their biggest challenge will come from last year's winner, German-made Opel driver Graham Moore, whose victory has strangely inspired his fiercest rivals.
Oh, most definitely. It's an inspiration. It just proves that someone on a limited sort of a budget can achieve those sorts of results. You know, we achieved moderate success in my 318 BMW last year on an absolute shoestring. But you know, the nature of the racing is that it's tight up the front, and by virtue of the fact that people have mechanical problems and what have you, as long as you're consistent, you've got every chance of ending up with the sort of results that Graham achieved, and as I said, I achieved some moderate results as well, which we're happy with.
For some privateers, life is stressful on the superhighway, but Peugeot's Jeff Full is confident. backed by colourful manager Tony Jaggs, responsible for getting World 500cc star Kevin Schwantz into a Peugeot at the Gold Coast Indy, Full says Peugeot is flying.
It's basically a very high horsepower car. It cuts through the air very well in aerodynamically. I think at the Gold Coast Grand Prix we were the quickest car down the straight by about 5 kilometres an hour. So it's a fast car in terms of horsepower and outright speed.
But some are so passionate they'll even give up their job. Mark Adderton's unemployment benefits is a stronger and faster Peugeot.
This car's the same shape as the older cars that we had last year. It's got a lot more horsepower. It runs about 320 horsepower up to what we ran last year was 290 horsepower. It's got a different suspension system. It's got a sequential gearbox, which has got a sensor on the actual arm of the gearbox where you can flat change. So it's it picks up a lot of time in gear changes.
He's a Formula Ford champion, go-karter, Oscar champion, Group A tourer. Steve Richards at 96 is aboard Honda, switching from Alfa.
I think the car feels great. It's a current spec car, as in it's a current spec British Championship car. And really, at the moment, the engine feels great. The car's generating a lot more downforce than our Alfa Romeo did, so I think it should be a good package.
Well, I think that'll be a great little car for Steve in the Super Touring Series. These tracks out in Australia obviously are different to what they race in England, so I mean, I don't think the car's going to be head and shoulders better than anything else, but it's going to be right up there with the best of them, and that's what the class needs.
Richards has acclimatised quickly to his new look Honda. He's cool-headed, organised, and says the new spec Honda is looking good.
At the moment, with the minimal amount of laps that I've done in the car, it's really a bit hard to say, but the pace initially straight away is outstanding. But I'm sure once we get more attuned to the car and I get attuned to the car and the team does, we'll be right there.
Honda is watching Richards drive at the Super Tourers. It's investigating investment next year.
We've gone and bought a car from MSD in the UK and we're hoping to do the right thing by Honda and get their support. But it's crucial. I mean, this is where motor racing in Australia is leading. The more manufacturer support we can get for the class, the more cars that they will sell and the more exposure we can give them.
Australian Super Touring is taking the lead from the likes of Formula One and the British Touring Car Championship. The role of aerodynamics is vital.
The aerodynamic package on this car is current 96 specification, so it is what they're running in the UK now in the British Championship. So really that probably gives us an even better feel for the rest of the season because we know we've got a current car.
Steve Richards is predicting the best Australian season yet.
This year's racing will be the most exciting racing we've probably seen in Australia for a long time, but I wouldn't discount Peugeot, I wouldn't discount Ford. It is going to be a very close and exciting season.
Richards knows all about the comparisons. Jeff Brabham has them too. Steve's father, Jim, is one of the sport's greatest, and Steve doesn't mind the pressure.
I run my own separate team, and or I'm involved in my own separate team. And Dad really enjoys what I'm doing, and I enjoy what he's doing. We both have a respect for each other.
In their private world, these men are promising a revolution in '96. The Toka Privateers Challenge boasts the unheralded stories. Not the bucks, not the technology, not the fancy computers and engineers. But if luck can swing their way, the privateers can become at the vanguard of Super Touring in '96. They've flourished in the high-octane spoils of victory. BMW, back-to-back champions, and now the German powerhouse is into overdrive. 4 blazing new BMWs, shipped in from their state-of-the-art home, now in England. 10 spanking new engines, backup technology, and the latest aerodynamics, putting BMW on track for title number 3.
Well, I think the car itself is just generally a little bit better than what we had last year. You know, it's got a slightly smaller, more powerful engine. They've done some work in some areas in the suspension and aerodynamics, and above all, I think our team's a little bit better this year. Well, I think we've got a good chance because, you know, we have a very good team, and obviously the cars arrived in this country pretty well sorted out. So it's really just a matter of us fine-tuning them through each racetrack. And, you know, if we can have a trouble-free season without too many mistakes being made and getting the car right for every racetrack we go to, I feel like I've got as good a chance as anybody.
BMW boasts the cutting edge. It's Australian-based on the Gold Coast. Its workshop led by motor racing legend Frank Gardner. He works around the clock to maximise BMW's racing potential.
Well, I don't think a race car ever reaches full potential. I mean, there's always something you can do to make a race car better, and I think, you know, certainly myself, I mean, I always go in to testing or practice or getting ready for qualifying, thinking that my car's not good enough and what can I do to improve it. So, you know, once we, you know, cross the bridge and make it better, there's always another bridge to cross, and you just got to keep working that way and try to improve the car all the time.
At just 29, Paul Morris is an emerging international star. He won Formula Ford, Australian Touring Cars and the Super Tourers, clinching the Australian Super Touring Championship by way of 8 scintillating skill drives in '95. It sparked the season's most fascinating head-to-head rivalry. Morris v second-place Jeff Brabham, sure to ignite again.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line. I find myself alone when you stay.
That was a moment.
Yes, I'll admit that I'm a...
The biggest threat last year did come from Jeff, and he pushed me pretty hard all the way and ended in some panel damage sometimes, and sometimes it didn't. But you got to keep that relationship on the track, and we're good mates off the track, but I'm sure he's not going to give an inch, and I definitely don't want him to beat me either.
For every race champion comes leadership, knowledge. Frank Gardner, with years behind the wheel and many in management, has the perfect formula. A mix of youth and experience in drivers, and a vast array of experts strategically placed in BMW's engine room.
When you first meet Frank, he's a hard guy to get to know, but once you learn to how he deals with things, it's pretty easy to get along with. You do things his way and you don't sort of end up in trouble, and you've got to realise that he's been around a long time and he's not telling you stuff just for the fun of it.
On a global level, BMW has powered onto the racing stage, dominating the biggest international events from Formula One to World Touring Cars. Its dynamism, philosophy, pedigree, style and sophistication demands it. As BMW steers its force into '96, it focuses on a mighty treble. Only bad luck will stand in its way.
So I think, you know, my teammate Paul Morris is going to be tough to beat, and if I can beat him, then I think I'm going to have a good chance to win the championship. But, you know, it's going to be close between him and myself again.
Next on Super Tourist Sunday, the $300,000 dancing horse, the Ferrari, its thoroughbred competitors Lotus, the Porsche, the Showroom Showdown.
Come on, girls!
Competition will be supported by what's widely acclaimed as the Showroom Showdown, GT production, the exotic, the luxury, the new face of the tourist program. In the dawn of this new GT era, there is a magnificent showpiece, an eye-catcher, from the rich home of motorsport, the Ferrari, and behind the wheel, Tasmanian Devil, John Bowe.
Well, I think Ferraris in general are special. I mean, everybody loves Ferraris, or anybody that likes cars loves Ferraris.
At $1 over 300,000, this is no small entry. It's a sexy, charismatic machine, pronouncing the seduction which has made the dancing horse the pride of F1. And from the Ferrari European Challenge Series, Ross Palmer is wooing a new party of nouveau GT fans.
Well, I think GT production racing is a very interesting category. It relates directly to the motor industry. It relates to the cars we drive. So to have a Ferrari in there competing with purpose-built RS/CS Porsches and RX-7 SP Mazdas, I think it's got to be a positive step for the class.
But romance goes out the window when John Bowe drives the Ferrari. He demands satisfaction. He wants to be #1.
And it's an interesting challenge, like it's a passionate challenge as far as I'm concerned, because I'd love to beat those Porsches.
Porsche, Peter Fitzgerald and veteran race name Jim Richards are aware of Ferrari's front. They outdrove their opponents last year, but it might be different this time.
Well, with the likes of John Bowe behind the wheel, you can't write the car off. I would say normally I wouldn't be threatened by the 355. I've driven one and I don't think it's as good as a Porsche. But with someone like John behind the wheel and the development they'll do, I think he could have a threat, yes.
The Ferrari probably is going to be a little bit light on development, but as the series goes by, I think it's going to be a real threat because its power-to-weight ratio is probably equal to the Porsche, maybe a little bit better.
Many years of Formula One intensity have generated a hard-nosed attitude for Lotus. Driver Jim Zerafos confident the modified look will work.
The car will have slightly different specs and it should be very competitive for the exciting 96 GT series.
Ferrari, Porsche, Lotus, names synonymous with the exotic journeyman of motor racing and the GT production series. It will focus their incredible history, pedigree and performance, boasting bigger numbers, more classes, larger grids. The expectations for GTs are high.
Stick around, the two-wheelers are next, the World Superbike Championship from Hockenheim, Germany. Watch local boy Troy Corser match it with the international best.
So now, the racing for season 96 motors off. Who will take the coveted Super Tourist Championship? Will BMW's Morris and Brabham make it 3? Will Audi grab the wheel? Or will a reinvigorated Peter Brock lead Volvo into race battle? The series, Australian Super Tourist, begins here on 10 Sports next week, direct from Amaroo, then unwinds on a spectacular journey round the country. Porsche, Lotus, Ferrari, GTs, BMW, Audis, Volvos, the privateers. Let the battle begin. It starts next week here on 10.
but they was ready. So are you ready, Lord? They was ready. Are you ready?